With the looming release of Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, we thought we'd do a cool countdown of things you may or may not know about the blockbuster film franchise. Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to delve behind the scenes of this beloved action series. 5. How to write a Mission Impossible movie. Let's take a cue from the films themselves. How do you write a satisfying Mission Impossible movie? Franchise veteran Christopher McQuarrie faced this issue when scripting Fallout. Studying the previous installments, he noted that most Mission Impossible films tend to peak in the middle, that their most memorable action set pieces are in their first and second acts, with somewhat bland or forgettable climaxes. As a result, there's no sense of rising action across the films themselves. So, unlike earlier Mission Impossible films, Fallout's climax had to be its biggest set piece. The entire helicopter chase sequence was reverse engineered from star Tom Cruise telling McQuarrie, "I want to learn how to fly, and you're going to figure out a sequence that makes use of that." From there, McQuarrie compiled a list of countries that would let an actor with 6 weeks of experience fly a helicopter, and then which of those would photograph well on camera. He settled on New Zealand. Then he made a list of countries that New Zealand could double for, arriving at Kashmir as the location for the movie's climax. So, when writing a Mission Impossible movie, much like this list, you begin at the end and work your way back. Okay, so let's jump back to the beginning. 4. The villain of the first movie was the hero of the television show. Obviously, Mission Impossible is based on a classic 1960s television show. However, the film franchise has never been slavishly devoted to that series. There's minimal distracting fan service and continuity fetishism. In fact, the first film of the series, Brian De Palma's Mission Impossible, did something truly radical. It revealed that the villain of the piece was Jim Phelps, the protagonist of the television show, who was played by Jon Voight in the film. Joining the show in its second season, Phelps had been the heart of Mission Impossible. Actor Peter Graves had earned an Emmy nomination and won a Golden Globe for his work in the role. The classic "Your mission, should you choose to accept it" briefing at the start of most adventures was directed to Phelps. Phelps was basically the James T. Kirk of Mission Impossible. There was some controversy at this big twist. Graves' co-star Greg Morris walked out of his screening of the film describing it as an abomination. Graves himself stated that although he had never been approached, he would not have wanted to be involved with that twist and stated, "I didn't like that very much." Graves is entitled to his opinion, but the twist holds up. De Palma's Mission Impossible took a bold risk, and in doing so, revitalized the franchise for a new generation. Number 3. Alfred Hitchcock is a huge influence on the films. Speaking of Brian De Palma's original Mission Impossible, one of the director's lasting legacies on the film series, outside of action set pieces built around dangling from a great height, is his deep and abiding affection for director Alfred Hitchcock, known as the Master of Suspense. Ironically, De Palma's Mission Impossible is one of the films of the series least heavily influenced by Hitchcock. John Woo's Mission Impossible 2 isn't just the longest shaving commercial ever committed to film, it's also almost a scene-for-scene remake of the classic Notorious. The iconic Opera House scene in Rogue Nation isn't just riffing on the best scene in Quantum of Solace, it's also alluding to a key scene from The Man Who Knew Too Much, which also inspired Martin Scorsese's fictitious Lost Hitchcock movie in his short film and long advertisement, The Key to Reserva. There's a solid argument that these Mission Impossible films are all about movie making, with masks, props, and sets. So this Hitchcock influence lends the franchise a sort of prestige. Hitchcock's influence extends to Dead Reckoning Part 1, particularly in its treatment of women. In Dead Reckoning, there are really only 2 women in the world, each of whom is doubled within the narrative. There's the Hitchcockian bleach blonde ice queen who will betray you, and the sweet brunette that you have to save. Hey, wait a minute. What? Number 2. The films are a great window into Tom Cruise's relationship with audiences. French director Jacques Rivette once argued that every film is a documentary of its own making, and Jean-Luc Godard once contended that every film is a documentary of its actors. Rewatching the Mission Impossible films is an interesting exploration of Tom Cruise's shifting relationship with the public's image of him. In the original Mission Impossible, he's the young up-and-comer who wants to be counted alongside the best of 60s and 70s Hollywood, like director Brian De Palma and co-star Jon Voight. This is the young star who go on to appear in Stanley Kubrick's last film and make a pair of blockbusters with Steven Spielberg. Cruise worked on Mission Impossible 2 after filming intense marriage drama Eyes Wide Shut with Nicole Kidman. Kidman and Cruise divorced a year after Mission Impossible 2 released, which might explain the film's big divorce energy. The long hair, the motorbike, the leather jacket, the horniness, the dialogue. It's a midlife crisis in celluloid. By the time he made Mission Impossible 3 a few years later, Cruise was trying to present a more approachable version of himself. He was doing interviews, talking about his religious beliefs, and confessing his love of Katie Holmes.
I'd marry him. I would too.
This was a time when Cruise was trying to present himself as an ordinary, relatable guy. the kind of guy you'd have a beer with, if he drank. After a series of high-profile scandals, Cruise's star was damaged and he withdrew from public life, becoming a lot less accessible. This coincides with a shift in how Ethan is presented in the films. He's often introduced in sparse surroundings, waiting to receive his mission, and then disappears into the ether at the end of the film. Ethan has no life outside of the movies. Much like Cruise's private life is now much more controlled. Number 1. Ghost Protocol was intended as Cruise's last Mission Impossible. As we just mentioned, Cruise was swept up in scandal around the time Mission Impossible 3 came out, and the film failed to perform at the box office. Paramount severed their 14-year relationship with him. Board members talked openly in the press about how Cruise had gone nuts. According to cinematographer Robert Elswit, the studio wanted to cycle Cruise out of the franchise, potentially replacing him with Oscar nominee and early Twitter competitor Jeremy Renner. With all the honor and confidence of a government official questioning Ethan Hunt, Renner stated, "It's a franchise to potentially take over. I can't predict the future and what they want, but that's certainly the idea." It's no coincidence that the film begins with the actor in literal movie jail, while a top-secret mission is undertaken by a handsome young actor with hair that can best be described as Cruisian. Cruise was supposed to introduce a new franchise lead, and then would be demoted in the cast to the role of elder mentor. However, things changed when Cruise's old friend Christopher McQuarrie was drafted to do uncredited rewrites. These radically diminished the role of Jeremy Renner's agent Brandt in the plot. McQuarrie deleted Brandt's original backstory and instead made it part of Ethan's backstory. After that was done, McQuarrie further diminished Brandt's role by taking his biggest kill and giving it to Simon Pegg's Benji, the franchise's comic relief. It all feels a little bit like Tom Cruise and his associates pulled a Mission Impossible operation on Paramount Pictures and Jeremy Renner. However, the key moment came during the shooting of that movie's final big action set piece. Hunt was originally supposed to receive a career-ending injury to his knee. Apparently, before they shot the scene, Cruise strapped himself into his stunt harness and told stunt coordinator Greg Schmears, "I ain't going nowhere." Damn right. And Blockbuster Cinema was the better for it. That was apparently the last anybody heard of that leg-breaking stunt. Just like Shelley